Now, it's time for us to listen to an interesting talk called Story Design, a foundationally human approach to digital learning. For this session, we will have a wonderful story designer, Mr. Rance Greene from needastory.com. Before we start, I would like to say a little bit about the speaker. Mr. Greene formed needastory.com and the School of Story Design for those who struggle with storytelling at work. His methodology, story design, gives leaders and talent development professionals a systematic and creative way for discovering who their audience is and how to persuade them to take action on new ideas. He helps leadership teams, entrepreneurs, and instructional designers discover that they are uniquely equipped to tell the best story for their audiences. Mr. Greene is the author of Instructional Story Design, a practical guide for developing stories that train. He coaches, teaches, speaks, and writes often on the benefits of stories to connect people to one another. Now, I am pleased to invite Mr. Rance Greene to begin the session.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. Well, it's great.
Hi.
Thank you for having me. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, thank you so much, Farisa and the International Learning Resources Festival for inviting me to speak to you. I am joining you. Hello, Nur Atika. I'm probably butchered your name. I'm so sorry. But hello, it's great to it's great to be with you today. As was mentioned, I wrote this book. It's called Instructional Story Design. And I was so surprised when I first logged on, I saw Dr. Carl Kopp speaking. And actually Carl Kopp wrote the foreword to the book. It's by him. He wrote it. So he's a good friend of mine. And so I'm glad that you guys got him a couple of years ago. He's always so fun, and especially when he's talking about gamification. But yes, I wanted to talk to you today about a foundationally human approach to digital learning. But before we do that, if I may share my screen, I'm going to ask you to do something for me. And I would like for you, if you are able, on your device of choice, whether it's the computer or on your phone, please go to menti.com and put the code that you see on the screen there into the, when it prompts you, put in that code 51983805. And real quick, I'm just going to go over to Menti and make it available to you. Just a moment while I make that active. Hold on just a second. There we go. Okay, so there is the code 51983805. And in a word or a phrase, I would like for you to describe what is humanized instruction. And so as you put your answers in, they should appear on your screen. And let me reshare. Yeah, there we go. I'm actually going to share the Menti window so that you can see we can all see together the answers that are coming in. Okay. So a lot of feeling. That's nice. Feel human, feel love, feel care. Engagement, learner-centered, personalized, engagement. Oh, I like that. Conversational. Yeah, conversational. That's nice. When we're conversing with people, it's such a human-centered thing, just to have this back and forth. I speak, you speak. So nice. Easy to understand. Personalized. Simple. Yeah. Simple. That's a great way to put it. Empathy is another characteristic of humanized instruction. Very nice. It looks like personalized is being used quite a bit here because it's the bigger word. To feel, okay, to be understandable. Very nice. Communication, more understanding. Good. You can keep putting those words and phrases into menti.com and more. Oh, I like that word, trust. To feel love. Love, two loves. Awesome. We don't often hear the word love associated with instruction, do we? Sensitive. Yeah, sensitive to who you're, I like that, sensitive. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about, being sensitive to our audience. To visualize, neat. Nonverbal. How do you communicate nonverbally? How do you visualize? Good. So we have simple and we have complex. So definitely the process of creating something simple is usually quite complex, right? Because we throw everything out onto the page and then we whittle it down to those very essential things that make it so wonderfully simple. It looks like flexible is also rising to the top, as well as empathy, as well as visualize, and as well as love. Personalized remains the big one there. Touches of tenderness, nice. Own strength. Let's see what else, other new ones. Pace. Blended. Learner-centered. So I like this idea of flexibility and flexible as well, something that adapts to the person who is being instructed. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, very good. So I'd like for you to screenshot this so that you have, and I will also send this to you, download it and send it to you so that you can keep this, so that you kind of have a snapshot of how you think of, as a group, what humanized instruction is. And I want you to notice a lot of these things are emotional. I mean, look at this, reduce lonely. That's very warm. Feel, I see feel on here quite a bit. Love, there's a lot of emotion involved in something that is humanized. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through the activities that we're going to do together and the rest of this session together. Okay, just keep that in your mind. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. You guys can keep putting stuff in there if you want. It will keep accumulating your words and phrases. I'm going to share a story with you, and I would like for you, as you listen to this story, and the story is basically it's a training session. And so just some background, I'm going to be sharing with you from a very distinct point of view, and that is from an instructional design point of view, particularly instructional story design. I realize that many of you probably work in education, and that is totally fine, because what we're going to be discussing here is totally applicable to education. There might be some minor differences, but you all are wonderful, professionals who will be able to make those connections between instructional story design and the kind of work that you also design for education as well. And I love talking to education groups because you guys are educating the future of our world, and I do hope that you will be able to connect with them and motivate them through storytelling. So, shall we begin? let's start with the story. And you guys can use the chat to talk with me because I am going to be asking a lot of questions. I'm not sure if you can unmute, but when we get to that point, I will let you know. Okay, let's get started with the story. And okay, and so here is your instructor for this training. And remember, I want you to take note as you're listening to the story unfold, as you're listening to this training. I want you to put yourself in the seat of the learner. And as you are listening, take note of how you feel while this person is training you. And you can write those feelings in the chat. You can type what your observations are in the chat as the video is playing. And at the end, I've got a few questions for you. All right, let's begin. But you know what? I need to make sure that I'm sharing sound. I wasn't. Okay. Now I am, and you should be able to hear. Oops. You should be able to hear the video. If someone who's listening could just say, yes, I hear the sound when I start the video, that would be great.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the call. It's 5 after the hour, so everyone should be here now. I'm Cindy, and I'll be your facilitator for today's session. Let's get started. Here's our learning objectives for today's session. Oh, let me turn off my video so I'm not distracting and share my screen. There we go. Okay, so as I was saying, here's the learning objectives for today's session. Let me go through them one by one, then I'll see if you have any questions. Any questions before we get started? You can type them in the chat. All right, let's get started. So before we go on, any questions about our objectives today? All right, let's move on to our first point. Any questions about the first point? Use the chat to type your questions. I'll take it that you're with me 100%. Let's move on to the next point. This is a really important one. There's a lot of information to get through. No, Bitsy, down. No, Bitsy, down. Down. Good girl. Sorry, that was Bitsy. She's a Rottweiler. I just got her. You know. Sorry. Like I said, there's a lot of information on this one. Really important stuff. So stay with me. I hope you got all of that. I know it's a lot to take in. Let me know if you need me to stop and explain anything, especially on this point. Anybody? Use the chat. Anybody? Okay. No responses, that's okay. Remember, you can use the chat to ask questions. We love questions. I like this next slide. It's great for visual learners. Now, you might not be able to read the smaller fonts, but I'll explain. Look at the 2nd and 8th bars from the left. Notice the relationship between how these two bars are. Graphs are so great for learning. Any questions? Silence is golden. Now, this next slide is a little more interactive. How many of you know what this is? Anyone? It's the Grand Canyon. Has anyone ever been to the Grand Canyon? Oh, wow, nobody. I went once when I was a girl. I don't remember it that much, but the pictures, really amazing. Now, you might be wondering what the Grand Canyon has to do with our topic today. Well, not very much, but I thought it'd be a nice break from the content. I'll just keep the photo up while we go over this next point. Okay, that was a lot of content. Any questions? Any questions? Let me stop for questions. Anyone? Anybody have a question? You've been a great class. I've loved this. Thank you so much for your attention. I have one last question for you. What's one thing you're going to take away from today's session? Just type your answer in the chat. Anyone? Oh, we have someone who's been to the Grand Canyon. Fantastic. We'll have to talk about that offline. Well, thanks for your time, everybody. We'll see you next week for the second session. Bye-bye now.
All right. Thank you, Cindy, for that wonderful lesson. I would just like to ask you to type in the chat on a scale from 1 to 10. What was your engagement level? So 1 is no engagement whatsoever, and 10 is I was deeply engaged by that training program. Okay, so we have a little bit of a range here starting. Okay, 1, 5, 3, 9. My goodness. You guys are being very generous to Cindy. Okay, let me ask you, how did you feel during Cindy's presentation? How did you feel? You felt, okay, Ozma felt overwhelmed. There's a lot of information to take in. How else did you feel? Putting yourself in the learner, difficult to remain engaged. It did have some structure. Yes, it did have structure. So we have to give her that for sure. Any other, how did you feel while you were watching this? So Fadzila, okay, can you describe maybe, Fadzila, how it felt interactive? What was interactive about it? Think a little bit back to the cloud, the word cloud that we just created. And remember all the words that you put in there about humanized learning. So the student can give feedback through the chat. That is true. Did they? Did they give feedback through the chat? So think about the words that came up in that word cloud. You could, all the feelings, like the feeling of love, the feeling of flexibility. Do you feel like this experience embodied those things? Not really. Okay. So I would like to hear from you. What are some things that you might have done a bit differently than Cindy, that if she were to do these things might push her training a little more toward a humanized experience? What are some suggestions that you would give Cindy? Give you some time to type. So Hasnain, let the learners also speak and take part in facilitation. So it was very much a one-way delivery. Maybe less formal, broken down to little pockets of conversations of topics. Good. Okay, yeah, you can unmute if you would just like to speak your suggestions to Cindy. What other suggestions do you have for her that would make it a bit more humanized? Engaging them with polls and questions, something that would actually solicit a response, right? She did ask a question. She kept asking the same question over and over, right? Are there any questions? But no one responded, right? Why didn't they respond? Why do you think that they didn't respond, readily? maybe lazy to chat. Maybe they were, checking their email, right? Or doing something else. But when we look at how, so they did not know what to ask. Yeah, they didn't know what to ask. They were given very little, maybe very little to go on. Yeah, that's a good one. She didn't turn on her camera. In fact, she turned it off, right? She made a point to turn it off. She needs to turn on the camera like I'm doing now. So I am feeling that I'm dealing with a human. Yes, Lewis, thank you. Yeah, dealing with a human. So, there's a humanizing factor, right? Time given to answer questions is too fast. So yeah, sometimes you do have to like just be silent and be comfortable with silence, right? Like I'm doing tonight. Like I want to give you guys time to think. I want you to think. I want you to respond. If I just keep going, yeah. So the teacher answers everything herself. Very good, guys. Very good. These are good suggestions. Anything else that you can think of that you might tell Cindy to help her humanize her instructional experience? Multimedia might help, sure. Good. Well, I would like to show you tonight, well, this morning for you, bring in personal experience. Personal experience. Now we're getting towards something that we're going to be actually talking about tonight. Perhaps you could call out students' names rather than asking an open question. Very nice. More story. Yeah, to engage the participant. Somebody read the title of this session today. Good. More story to engage the participant. Give some self-test based on the topic discussed. Awesome. Excellent. Excellent. So I do want to share with you a very specific way of humanizing instruction, and that is through storytelling. Now, I am sure that you are doing a lot already to engage, your learning audiences. Maybe we could just take a moment to list what those are. So go back to the menti.com and let's ask the next question. And it is, let's see, it's going to be this question. Oh, you guys are already answering. Awesome. So what specific activities are you doing now to humanize the learning experience? So if you're just now joining us, go to menti.com and use the code 5198-3805 to answer this question. So right now you are talking to the participants live. You're actually showing emotion. Wow, that's awesome. You're showing sympathy, empathy for. Okay, awesome. You're using real life examples. That's a great specific way to humanize the learning experience. You're connecting with them, communicating with them, touches of tenderness. What are you doing to connect with them? When you communicate with them, what are you doing that humanizes that experience? Turn on the camera, speak slowly. Nice. Okay, use reactions like smiles and thumbs up that you're paying attention, and maybe they can do the same toward you. Use your own experience for sharing. Good. Personalized stories are very nice. It not only produces great material for instruction, but it also makes you as an instructor a human, right? It personalizes the whole experience. You use hands-on activities, infographics. Hands-on activities are difficult, right? In a digital world, but That's great that you're doing that. Emoji reactions, be at the learner level. Yeah, like kind of get in their shoes, so to speak. Think like they think. Any other things that you're doing now to humanize that learning experience? You can keep putting your ideas in even while we're continuing on. So exam tips. Adjust task according to level, simple, medium, hard. That's great. So you're being adaptive, you're being flexible, like we put in that word cloud. Tell jokes, sure. Laughter is great. You're producing an emotion. And that was a lot of what you talked about in the word cloud as well. Ask them to share their stories and experiences. Wonderful. You know, it takes, before they will do that though, it really does take somebody brave enough to share their story. And that would be you, the instructor. And so as you share your story with them, they're going to respond in kind and share theirs with you. Excellent. All right. So you guys can continue to share those ideas. What I would like to share with you right now. Okay, some of you use a whiteboard. That's cool. That's great. What I would like to share with you is the story design model. And this is the heart of the book and the heart of the practice of instructional story design. And this is what it looks like. So at the top of your page, if you would write the word story, and at the bottom of your page, write the word action with some space in the middle. We're going to be filling in this gap. And what this means is that we want our story for training to connect concretely to the action we want people to take as a result of training. Okay, so the story and the action. So we need to connect the story to the action we want people to take. Good? All right, so this is the beginning of the model. Now, let's talk about the story at the top of that page. A story for training has to contain certain elements. So if you wouldn't mind, just in the chat, type what you feel like the elements of a story are. What makes a story a story? The stories you write, you read, you tell, you listen to. What are the components of a story that make it a story? Give me a moment to put your answers in the chat. What are the components of a story? Okay, we have a start, a flow, and an end. Very nice. Thank you, Hasnain. What else? What are the other components of a story? You can think about, stories that you might read to your children, stories that you read in a book or see on a movie. So we have characters. Thank you, Asma. Real experiences, characters, heroes, villains, drama. Awesome. Yeah, learning points. A lot of stories do have at the very end, they might have, a learning point that they want to make at the end. Plot, setting, characters, action. Yes, action. If you have a story with no action, is it even a story? I don't think so. Impact, purpose, reason of such a story. Good, good, good. So what about that plot? What about that plot? What is going on in this story that the characters are dealing with? Something specific about that plot. Something that the characters are perhaps struggling with. Any ideas? Up and down graph of a story. Sure, stories have ups and they have downs. What's happening in those downs? You guys are like, just tell us what it is. Come on, I'm gonna give you one more, I'm gonna give 10 more seconds. Anybody have an idea of what the characters are dealing with in the story? There is some suspense, absolutely, there's suspense. The spirit of the story, the rise to the climax. What is that thing? What is that elusive thing that we call that struggle that they're going through, that the characters are going through? Role modeling, thank you, Hasnain. Okay, I'm gonna let you off the hook. There's two elements in any story for training. Okay, the first one is relatable characters. So you can put that underneath story and then put an addition sign here, plus relatable characters plus boom, 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 strong conflict. There has to be conflict in the story. So relatable characters plus strong conflict equals, and we'll get to the equals part in just a minute. So I use the word relatable characters. I use the word relatable because the viewer of the story has to relate to the characters. They have to have some empathy for that character, right? A lot of you wrote the word empathy in our word cloud earlier. So stories inherently have this wonderful effect of winning over the readers of or the viewers of that story through presenting relatable characters. So the characters have to be relatable, and the conflict has to be strong. And I use the word strong because it needs to be as strong as possible, and it has to be there. I want to remind everybody, you have to have conflict in your story, in a story for training, in a story for instruction. All right, so relatable characters and strong conflict. Now, what happens when you're watching a story and it has relatable characters and strong conflict? What happens inside of you? I'm just going to ask you that question. What happens when you see relatable characters that you care about in conflict? What's going on inside of you as the listener of that story, the watcher of that story? Yeah, absolutely. You're emotionally involved, you're relating to it, you're emotionally connected, it's having an impact on you. You're thinking about your own experiences, very nice. And that stories have this wonderful way of kind of like putting us in a flight simulator. So just like a flight simulator prepares a pilot for real life, stories have that same effect on us. They make us ready to take action. That's why we cry when something is sad in a story. That's why we're on the edge of our seat in a tense moment. Absolutely. So curiosity, we root for the character and want to know what's going to happen. Yes, we want to know what's going to happen, Alex. And I call that desire for resolution. When you put relatable characters into strong conflict, it produces a desire for resolution. Please write that down because you will be tested on this information at the end or maybe in the middle. You never know. So yes, relatable characters and strong conflict produces a desire for resolution. And once your story for instruction has produced that desire for resolution, you have the learner right where you want them. And that's exactly where they want to be too. I mean, think about it. Anytime you're watching a story, as soon as there's no more desire for resolution, you put the book down or you turn off the television, or you know, like, this movie isn't even worth it. I'm out of here. It's boring. So yes, once you produce that desire for resolution, you've kind of brought the characters up to that point, as one of you mentioned, the climax of the conflict, then the story has done its job. Now we have the desire for resolution, and we are open to receive the very last step, because you will see that there is a gap here, one last step to connect the story to the action that we want people to take as a result of instruction. And that is, as you may guess, instruction. And this is the story design model. A story that contains relatable characters and strong conflict produces a desire for resolution within the person watching the story, which makes them open and ready to receive instruction and prepares them to take action on that instruction. That's the model. Now, I'd like for us to look at, okay, how do we actually create a story then based on this model? Do we just like make up characters? Where does this conflict come from? I would like to show you. Okay. All right. So in the world of instructional design, and some of you probably live in that world, as well as in education, there's a process at the very beginning, before we do any kind of design work, before we develop slides for a PowerPoint, anything like that, we do this process of analysis. And one of the first things we have to do is to get to know who our audience is. Who are we actually talking to? And so I encourage you, whomever that learner is, whether you are designing for a corporate audience or an education or a group of students, whoever those students are, create a learner profile, or I like to call it an audience profile. Create a learning audience profile. Who are these people that you are instructing? And here's some of the questions that I like to ask about this audience. And we'll get to this thing on the right in just a minute. Let's just talk about the audience profile. What does this learning audience value? What are their current circumstances? How are they reacting to those circumstances? What do they fear? What do they do in their spare time? Now, I want you to think about one of your learning audiences. Maybe some of you even like help professors, design their classes, their online digital learning. Do those professors, are they able to articulate the answers to these questions regarding their learning audience, their students? And, it's important too to ask things about cognition. What do these students already know? Do I have to start with a definition? Can I up up it to like more of a description? Can I share some examples with them? Ultimately, can I give them practice doing what I'm asking them to do? Where on that design continuum do I need to start? But I also encourage that questions like this, that get to who they are as people, that we answer those questions as well. That's the only way we can humanize digital learning, if we know who we are talking to. And so I create an audience profile for every audience that I speak to, every audience that I consult for, every audience that I design a course for. I know intimately, as intimately as I can, who that audience is. And this will help you to answer the big question: how will instruction benefit them personally? Beyond passing the test, beyond getting a degree, how will instruction benefit them personally? How's it going to benefit what they value? How is it going to address some of their current circumstances? How is it going to alleviate some of their fears? And I asked this last question: what do they do in their spare time? And I've been tempted many times to just take this one off the list, but I'm always glad I keep it on, because a lot of times the answer to that question actually provides ideas of what kind of stories I can tell. So, if they're interested in a certain sport, or if this particular group is, you know, crazy about, a certain type of movie or something, then I can use that information in my storytelling. And I can also it benefits me to know that, because it reminds me that they are a person. They are more than a brain. They are also emotional beings. So that's the first thing that we must have if we're going to design instruction and audience profile. The second thing that we have to have, and this is probably something you already excel at, is an action list. And the answer to this question is essentially, what am I asking students to do? And in the world of instructional design, we want to know specifically, what are the observable actions we are asking them to do? Can I describe those actions with strong verbs? Can I put those actions in a logical order? First, I want you to do this, then I want you to do this, then I want you to do this. And then I ask the subject matter expert, hey, this is my list of actions. Is this correct? If you are the subject matter experts, then, then you can look at it yourself. If you're working with the subject matter expert, maybe a professor, then you can show them that action list and say, hey, is this what you want students to do? Is this going to produce success? And if you can do those 4 things when you're creating your action list, then you have a very useful tool, not only for instruction, but for the story. And I'm going to show you how that works. And with education in particular, and I've had wonderful conversations with other groups of educators. And, a lot of times there's a wrestling match with the action list, because I think that a lot of universities, at least in America, struggle with this. What are we preparing students to do? Are we just preparing them to pass a test? Are we just, giving them a piece of paper that has a degree on it? Or are they prepared for the workforce? Are they prepared to do the things that are required of them when they land a job? And so those are some, higher level questions that I will leave to the education world. but it does, this subject of an action list does bring up topics like that. So let me show you how this plays out in digital learning. So we have these two assets from doing our analysis. We know who our learning audience is, and we know what we are asking them to do. If you have those two things, you can create instruction, and you can create a story for that instruction. So remember our model. What are the two elements? This is test time. What are the two elements of a story for training? This is open book, so you can use your notes. Put the answer in the chat. First one is the winner. I don't know what you win, but you're the winner. What are the two elements of a story for training? So you are typing furiously, I can tell. I'm just gonna wait. Yeah. Alex, thank you. Relatable characters and what kind of conflict? Yes, Hasnain. Big winner, big winner. Okay, relatable characters and strong conflict. Yes, these are the two elements of a story for training. Relatable characters, strong conflict. Now, where do we get these relatable characters from? The work that you've already done to produce good instruction is already available to you. You've got your audience profile. Now that you know who these characters are, who your learning audience is, you can create a character that they relate to. And what do you have for conflict? Okay, you want to put these relatable characters into conflict with something, right? That something is the action list. Put relatable characters into strong conflict with the action list, the list of observable actions on your action list. Latik, you are a step ahead. So when you do that, when you create this story with relatable characters and strong conflict, it does produce what Latik said, a desire for resolution. Very good. And then, oh, now you're 2 steps ahead. And so once that desire for resolution is sparked, then folks are ready to receive instruction. Now, let's help Cindy out. Cindy has just delivered a somewhat lackluster piece of instruction, digital learning. And now she is going back to the drawing board and thinking, I'd like to redo that virtual training experience. So let me go back to the drawing board and let me ask myself this question: who is my learning audience? Now, her learning audience is not within a university setting. She is actually in a retail setting. So some of the things that she finds out is that these are customer-facing roles in a grocery store. 85% of them are under 25 years old. The average tenure of an employee there is 4.5 years. So pretty high turnover. They value flexible work schedules and connecting with friends. They are unsure of how to interact with customers beyond answering direct questions, and they don't realize they can make an impact. They fear appearing stupid in front of their peers. And this is the first time anyone has taken a formal course on customer service. Now she knows a lot more about who she is training. She also asks herself, what am I asking? What am I training people to do? And so a lot of times when you talk with somebody who is an expert in what you are designing instruction for, they will say things like, well, they just need to be aware of fill in the blank, or they just need to understand fill in the blank, or they need to know fill in the blank. Well, be aware of, understand, and know are not observable actions. I can't watch somebody know or be aware of or understand, right? So I have a background in theater, and so I've directed a lot of plays. And when I'm directing an actor and I tell them, I want you to cross stage left, and I want you to be aware of our customer first policy, go ahead and do that. So we watch them cross stage left. Okay, that's an observable action. We can watch that happen. Now they're being aware of our customer first policy. Can I watch them do that? No, I cannot. I cannot watch them do that. So Cindy needs to do some work and drill down to some observable actions. And so she talks with the person who knows everything about the customer first policy, and she discovers that smiling at the customers is an observable action. Ask if you can help them. Walk with them to find the items they need. Engage in small talk as you walk and say, thanks for coming in today. Now, I want you to just look down that list at the words in orange. Are those observable? Can we watch people do those things? It's almost like watching a story unfold, kind of, because the actions are observable. We can like see it happening in our heads. Imagine, an employee smiling at a customer, asking if they can help. You can see them walking together to find the items that they need. You can see them engaging in small talk as they walk, and you can hear them saying, thanks for coming in today. And it's almost like a story unfolding, right? They're in such great logical order. You can actually see it happening and unfolding in your head. When you have an action list that is that you can visualize it, you're in a good place. Once the analysis is done and you know who your audience is and what they're supposed to do, then you can move into the design phase. And so Cindy does this. She uses the story design model. She creates a story with relatable characters in strong conflict. And so the relatable characters that she creates are these people that you see on the left side of the screen. They're employees. And they're in conflict with the action list that we looked at on the previous slide. And we're going to see what happens in relationship to the customer. Okay, so she is putting into effect, she's creating a story based on her audience profile and the action list by creating relatable characters and putting them into strong conflict. So this is version 2. And again, as she is presenting this new version of the course that she just taught at the beginning of our session, I'd like for you to take note of how you feel during this one. All right? So let's begin.
Hi, everyone. It's the top of the hour. Welcome to today's session. I'm Cindy. I'll be facilitating this conversation today. I want to thank you for completing the survey I sent out prior to this session. Looks like most of you have been here for 2 years or more and are attending today's session to brush up on your skills. That's great because we'll be using the chat extensively and we'll need your expertise during the session. About 30% of you are brand new to our store. Welcome. These online classes will get you started on the right foot. Take the worksheet I sent yesterday and have it ready. I'd like to start with a story. Afterwards, I'll ask you a few questions. Just a moment while I get the video up, and here we go. Think about what just happened in that story. Is there anything that seemed out of place to you? Type your answer in the chat. Okay, yes. The floor rep is on her phone, not listening to the customer. They seem uninterested in helping the customer. Good point. Can you expand on that? What are the floor reps doing that makes them seem uninterested in helping the customer? Great. Yes, they aren't really engaging in conversation. They're walking away from the customer before she's done talking. These are great observations. Okay, let's talk about some ways these employees could behave differently. What are your suggestions? Hi, everyone.
Okay. All right, so let's do the same thing. And on a scale from 1 to 10, I would like for 1 to be no engagement, 10 to be high engagement. How would you rate the experience so far in this course that she has, in this virtual course? Okay, Alex says 9. Cool. Okay, so consistently higher scores in this experience. Very nice. So I want you to think about why you are giving it this score. How did you feel when Cindy was presenting this time? You can just put a word or a phrase. How did you feel while she was delivering this instruction? A bit more involved. She feels more relaxed. Conversational. I feel engaged. Good. More humanized, and that's the goal, isn't it? More humanized. Can you think of some of the things that Cindy did this time that made you feel that way? What were some of the things that she, how did she behave differently in this one than she did in the first one? What are some of the specific things that she did that you're like, oh, this this person gets me. This person knows me. What were some of the practices she did? Sure, she had her camera on. What else did she do? What did she do at the beginning of the meeting? Before she even started, what did she do? Yeah, she acknowledged the audience and what they may want out of the training. Yep. Very good, Alex. Did she know who her audience was? And how do you know whether she did or not? What did she do to indicate that she actually knew who she was talking to? Maybe I should call out on some people. Yes, better than the previous video. So some of my own observations is that Cindy this time displayed some information about who the audience was. This many people were, new, some of them were tenured. She set some expectations that they would actually be conversing through the chat. And she also, after the story, asked some questions that actually provoked some responses, as opposed to her first one that got absolutely no responses, right? Except at the very end, somebody went to the Grand Canyon. So I'd like to show you kind of the methodology that I'm speaking of when it comes to the training part, the instruction part. So you've created this story that's created a desire for resolution, but now it's time to instruct using that story as the starting point. So let me share again. So you notice that Cindy began with a story. And then after that, she asked a reflect question, about how do you think that the customer felt. Then she presented a solve question. She asked her audience to solve something, and then she would give them feedback on their answer. So we saw this kind of play out in this digital learning environment. This can also play out in the same way if you are someone who develops e-learning. And it could look something like this. So here's the story, the video that Cindy showed. You just take that same video that she showed on a virtual call and you put it into the e-learning course. Then you ask a reflect question. How do you think the customer feels? And the learner has an opportunity now to reflect back on the story, particularly the emotional components of that story. And why is that important? Why is it important that we have some sort of an emotional connection in learning? You guys identified that at the very beginning when I asked you, what does humanized instruction look like? A lot of it involved emotion. And when we deprive learners from emotional input, in their brains, they're going to struggle to integrate new knowledge and skills. And brain science shows us now that we cannot do without emotional input. We have to have it. And so we don't want to deprive it. We want to provide it in abundance, or at least at an appropriate level. We need to provide some sort of emotional input. So give them a chance to think back to the story and think about the emotional input of that story. How do you think the customer feels? And, there's not a correct answer. They can put whatever they want here. That's not the point. The point is that we are giving them an opportunity to reconnect with the story and remember the emotions, because when they get back to real life, back on the floor at the grocery store, it's going to be those emotions, how they felt, that really drive action and behavior change. So then next slide. You said the customer could feel ignored and unimportant. Why do you think she felt that way? Give them a chance to type. Let them put their own answers there. They were on their phones, they didn't stop and ask if they could help, and so forth. Then they click submit. All right, this is what you said. What might they have done differently? Give them another opportunity. They could have looked for opportunities to interact with the customer. You could have walked with her down to aisle 9. Click submit. Okay, so these are the suggestions from the learner. Notice that at this point in the course, there's been no training. We've simply given them a story, and we've asked a couple of questions. And already they are thinking critically about the story and trying to figure out what should be done differently. So keep these suggestions in mind during the following activity as you choose a better response to the customer. And so now we are at a point where they are solving something. So in this case, what would you say to the customer? And we have 4 options. I'll just let you read through those a bit. You can put the answer to this question in the chat, A, B, C, or D. You have an answer, it's C. Cool, you are correct, Alex, but we're going to choose A because I want to show you what happens when you choose incorrectly. So not quite. It's good that you inform the customer where the dog food is located, but how will they find you again if they have problems? Right? So we give them not just incorrect, try again. No. We have to give them a reason behind why their choice was incorrect. Then it gives us instruction. Use the customer first job aid and respond another way. What's that? Oh yeah, here's this customer first job aid. What's that contain in it? It contains essentially the action list, the thing that you are training them to do. So give them an opportunity to use that to answer the question. So then they answer the question. Boop, there it is. See, Alex is correct. Thank you. Walking with the customer helps build rapport and trust. Everyone appreciates kindness. Your small acts of kindness like this have a positive impact on our customers. And you'll notice that the customer is showing up in the feedback. And so the story, in a way, is continuing into the instruction because we're using that one story to ask a series of questions to solve based on that story. It's the same structure: story, reflect, solve, feedback. So think of the way that you are presenting your own instruction. You can create a story based on who your audience is and what you're asking them to do. You can put relatable characters into strong conflict with that action list. You can give those learners an opportunity to reflect on that story, especially the emotional components of it. You can give them a chance to solve something. And then finally, you can give them feedback that is the training. So it's training flipped. It is, tell, test. It's the opposite of that. It's not even the opposite of that. It's a totally different thing. It's telling a story and training based on that story. So once again, the story design model: create a story with relatable characters and strong conflict, which produces a desire for resolution. Then they're ready for instruction and to take action on that instruction. That is the story design model. It has been delightful spending time in Malaysia today. I want to thank you guys for inviting me to come. There is a QR code there if you guys want to scan that, and just for, to give back. If you are interested in joining any of our workshops, then you are welcome to do so at 10% off using that 2023-10 code. But thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to spend this time with you. I don't know if there's time for questions, but I'm welcome. I'm happy to stay on to answer any of them.
Did everyone have any question? If not, then thank you so much to Mr. Rance Greene for a very interesting and stimulating session. I am sure that we have all benefited from your shared knowledge.